And welcome to the Midday Show. I'm Jeff Everett. He's Mark Messina. It's a dark, somber day here on the Midday Show. We're going to talk about the passing of Meatloaf. Mark's got a story for us. We're also going to talk about a few topics we missed out on yesterday, about a Pennsylvania teacher and a photo that came out. We're also going to talk about a news reporter from Penn State and her mishap on the road. And then we've got some pop culture stuff, some Super Bowl stuff, halftime show. We have some SNL Saturday Night Live fans. You'll want to stick around for what we're going to talk about at the end. Before we get to all of that, this is rough. Mark, how are you feeling today?
My camera keeps making it darker, and it should be. It's a dark, dark day.
I think it fits. I think this happened for a reason.
It fits with the gloom. Last night, I didn't even tell you this. You don't even know this. Last night, I was so pumped. John Mellencamp has a new album out today.
Oh, okay.
And he does a duet with Bruce Springsteen.
Oh.
And I listened to it last night. It's not bad. And
okay.
I mean, Mellencamp is his older stuff is better.
Sure.
It's he got to the point where he's rich, and he's always been kind of an angry dude. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I'll just put it out now, and I don't care if you like it or not.
Sure.
And he's had some good stuff, but it's but everything he puts out, I will buy because I feel like I owe it to him.
Sure.
Because he's been such and I like last night, it's probably, 11 o'clock. I learned that this song, I listened to the song. It's pretty cool. And I'm pumped and I'm ready to go. I don't know if it's at Walmart. It says Target.
Okay.
So I will go somewhere tonight and search this out so I can buy the actual CD. I think it's called Just a One-Eyed Jack or something like that. One-Eyed Jack is in the title. So last night I'm on top of the world. Then this morning I wake up and I learned that Meatloaf died. Yeah. And I am no longer on top of the world. It is Louis Anderson has also passed away, the comedian.
I saw that.
But yeah, this is sad. This sucks.
So I'll let you dive in because you're gonna. I'm sure you have a lot to say. Plus, you have a story to tell us on top of it. Let me just say this: you and I have talked a lot. Our age gap isn't that significant. However, what it does is there are gaps in my pop culture that you fill and vice versa. This is one of those gaps. I know who Meatloaf is. I know his best songs. I know that he was a significant part of Rocky Horror and all of those details. But this is certainly a gap in my pop culture lexicon. This is just, I've never gotten in the car and said, I want to listen to Meatloaf. I've never been a huge fan of Rocky Horror. He kind of skipped over my pop culture reference. So you are certainly going to carry today's show, and rightfully so, because I can tell by the way you walked in, he clearly mattered to you.
It is mind-boggling to anyone my age that there are people who ever got in a car and didn't want to listen to Meatloaf.
Well, can we tell the story real quick? We'll just put one of our employees on blast because that's what we do here on the Midday Show. We were going around the office saying, essentially either what did Meatloaf mean to you or do you know Meatloaf? And we have a younger employee who did not know who Meatloaf was until today.
Yes. Which is sad, which I blame her parents for a terrible upbringing because, I mean, when I woke up, I'd already got a text from my 18-year-old daughter that said Meatloaf died.
Okay.
And this is because she obviously had a better upbringing. So there's a true story. There's, honest to God, sit right back and you'll hear a tale. It was 1994. My brother was pitching for the Orioles, young star with the Orioles, and I was working on a radio show in Baltimore because this young up-and-coming guy who was in his early mid-20s was trying to get a sports talk show going in Baltimore, and he was doing all right. They did not have an all-sports station in Baltimore at the time, and he's trying to get this going, and I'd met him, and we'd sat through some games, and he knew that I knew sports and I love sports, and I'd done broadcasting in college because I'd done play-by-play for basketball games. Okay. So he knew I wasn't afraid of the microphone. He knew I had a lot of things to say, and we got along well. So we're doing this. That's my summer job in college. I'm a co-host of a sports talk show in Baltimore. Okay. And this guy in a previous life, I say he's mid-20s, but he'd already had a newspaper career. And he had a job as like an 18-year-old kid. He got some crappy job in newspaper, and ends up writing for the Baltimore Sun.
Okay.
And he's getting the shifts. He's a 19, 20-year-old kid. He's getting the shifts that nobody wants.
Okay.
And he goes with this idea, talk about making your own path. He goes to the bosses and says, I got an idea. I'll be the rock critic. And when bands come through the area, whether they're playing arenas or stadiums or even clubs, like Hammerjacks was a legendary place in Baltimore, a rock and roll club. He goes, I'll get me tickets and I'll go and I'll write a review of it for the paper the next day.
Okay.
So like, sure. So this guy had all these, like the movie Almost Famous. Mm-hmm. He's like, that's kind of my life a little bit.
Okay.
Because I'm a 19-year-old kid interviewing REM and Kiss and Rush and all these famous bands, because I was the rock critic for the Baltimore Sun because nobody else wanted to do it.
Okay.
So we're in the studio one day. It is, honest to God, it is, I got to get the days right. It's a Monday. And this guy, he says, hey, and we both loved Meatloaf. We loved the first album. And this is in the early 90s when Bat Out of Hell 2 came out. And I Would Do Anything for Love. Please tell me you know that song.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So it's a Monday. He says, hey, and the Yankees were in town. Mike was pitching for the Orioles. This is how much I know the story. The Yankees were in town Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Meatloaf was starting his world tour. His world tour was starting in Hershey. Okay. And it was Wednesday and Friday were the first two shows of the tour.
Both in Hershey.
Both in Hershey.
Okay.
So my co-host says, he said, can Mike get him tickets for the game on Thursday? Because this guy knew Meatloaf is a huge baseball fan. Okay. And I said, well, yeah, we can get tickets for Thursday. I was like, what does a rock star do on? He's like, nothing. He sits in his hotel room. He goes, he may go to Hershey Park or something, but because Meatloaf is so recognizable, it might be hard. He'll probably sit in his hotel room all day. Okay. So anyway. So he calls, and because he was still on the press releases, because he was a rock critic, he calls Meatloaf's management company, leaves a message, say, hey, I'm co-host, I'm Mike Messina's brother, blah, blah, blah. We can get you tickets for Thursday night show if you guys want to drive down. It's an hour and a half. Okay. 5 minutes later, the phone rings. And this is cell phone days. This is 1994. My co-host is like the only one that had a cell phone.
Right.
Phone rings. It's the guy's manager. And he says, isn't Messina pitching against Clemens tomorrow? Yeah. And he's like, well, yeah, but we figured your tour kicks off. Don't you have sound check tomorrow? And they just call Meat. Everyone just called him like it was his first name. Right. He's like, Meat says, screw sound check. He wants to see Messina pitch against Clemens. Okay. So now he's looking at me like, can Mike get Meatloaf 2 tickets for him and his manager? Like, sure. So we show up at the park. I was like, hey, you have to leave 2 tickets for it. Mike's like, are you kidding? We're like, no, it's long. He's coming tomorrow to the game. So we're in the studio and he's on the shake, and Meatloaf's going to sit with me in the seats in the family section. Yeah. But he got there early. He's on the field for batting practice, and he's like a little kid. Sure. He's meeting Cal Ripken. Yeah. He's meeting, and they're like, you sang Paradise by the Dashboard Light, and you're like coming, you want to meet me? Yeah. So anyway, I get there, and we broadcast in a downtown studio. He was on the field. We interviewed him during the show or during batting practice and stuff like that. Okay. But I would leave the studio and walk over to get to the game for Mike to see first pitch. First pitch then was 7:35. Okay. The show went till 8 o'clock. So when on nights that Mike pitched, I would bail out early. The other guy would wing it for the last hour, and then he would show up after that. So I get there. It's 5 minutes before I get to my seat. I always sit in my, and there is nobody. Like Meatloaf's not there. Like there's nobody. So I just sit down. I watch the first inning. First inning against Boston. It was Boston because no. Roger was still with Boston at the time. Did I say the Yankees? Yeah. It was Orioles versus Red Sox. Rogers was still with Boston. So we sit down 1, 2, 3 in the first inning. Okay. And now and I'm zoned. Meatloaf's here somewhere, but I'm zoned into the game. So my buddy, who was our field reporter, who was one that was like kind of guiding Meatloaf around, he comes down and he's like, dude, they gave us a private box up there, the Orioles did, because when Meatloaf was on the field, people were going crazy.
Okay.
There's no way he could have sat in the crowd. It would have been a mob scene.
Okay.
So they put us up there. And I was like, dude, I can't switch my seat. Mike just went 3 up, 3 down in the first inning. I can't move. And he looks at me and he's like, dude, we're going to go sit up in a skybox with Meatloaf. You're moving your seat.
Okay.
So I go up, and this is like, now I'm nervous because you just don't mess with the karma like this.
Okay.
So we get up there and I talked to you on the phone. Hey, you're Mike's brother. Hey, good first inning. And I look right at, now I talked to him, we interviewed him. So I had talked to him, never talked to him in person before, but I was like, listen, you don't understand this. I never change seat. Like when my brother's pitching, this is bad.
Yeah.
So if things go badly in the second inning, I got to go back.
Right.
And he's like, totally understand. So top of the second comes up. Mike goes 1, 2, 3 in the second inning with 2 strikeouts.
Okay.
And now Meatloaf's going, see, these seats are better. He didn't have any strikeouts in the first inning. These seats are better. So, all right. So now I'm settled in. I think the Orioles got to lead, whatever. So now it's 8:20, whatever. My co-host comes in, who is the guy who has set all this up. He's the one with the connections. He was the one with the idea. He sets it up.
Right.
He comes walking in the door. Meatloaf turns and points right at him, having no idea who he is. And he goes, if Mike starts doing bad, you've got to leave. And the guy's like, wait a minute. I'm like the mastermind of all this. So then we fast forward.
That is fantastic.
He ends up winning. I think he won. Mike won 3-2. I think Harold Baines hit an opposite field home run off Clemens to win 3-2. That's what I remember. So anyway, so we're up in the booth and we're yucking it up, and people are waving, and we're but it's not a big. It's a small. It's like an auxiliary booth.
Well,
this isn't like
they weren't planning to use it.
No,
right.
This is like spillover. We were the spillover.
Yeah.
So we're also at this point where the guy. There was an usher, and all I know is he was an usher near home plate, and his name was Kurt because we called him Home Plate Kurt. And he knew my co-host and all this stuff. So Kurt's waving up to us, and he's right down below us, and he's like, hey, to my co-host, remember that girl I was telling you about that I was trying to set you up with?
Right.
He's like, yeah. He goes, she's here tonight. She's sitting right over there. You can see her. And he's like, which girl? He goes, remember I was telling you the hot one with the long brown? You can see her. So here we are, and me and my buddy are kind of contorted out the window, trying to look over. And Meatloaf pulls his glasses out of his shirt pocket, and he's like, all right, I got to see this chick. So there's me and my buddy and Meatloaf trying to strain our way out the window to see this girl.
Now, he was a bigger dude.
Big dude.
Right? Okay.
Big dude. And then we go to the show. No, okay, we didn't go to Hershey because then they were playing Baltimore, and it's the East Coast, so Baltimore was like the third stop or the fifth stop.
So then they came back.
So they came back, and we saw him again, and we went backstage, and just a wonderful, just kind of like an aw shucks guy. And if you ever saw the story of him, like when there was something even before, wasn't he in the Hairspray? He did like the touring group of Hairspray. He's this he just doesn't look like a guitar player. Guitar players are little, scrawny. They're like guys with long hair that look like they're on heroin that weigh 130 pounds. He's like this 270-pound guy with long hair and cowboy boots, and he ran away from home because he didn't get along with his dad. He's the most unlikely superstar ever. Rolling Stone panned Bat Out of Hell. They gave it like 2 stars. They thought it sucked.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't there this idea that it was too theatrical?
Theatrical.
Okay.
It was too theatrical.
All
and I just watched Bohemian Rhapsody the other night. When they're like, no one will like Bohemian Rhapsody because no one likes opera, and they're not going to play a 7-minute song on the radio.
Right.
And Queen's like, yes, they are, and yes, they will. And yeah, it just didn't. His style, it didn't fit for anything. Paradise by the Dashboard Light. If it was a top 40 hit, I think it hit like number 38.
Okay.
But there's no single. Anything for Love went to number 1, I think, or the album went to number 1. But there was no single. 2 Out of 3 Ain't Bad had to do something.
Okay.
But it wasn't, yeah.
So just like out of curiosity, because again, like this falls kind of out of my lexicon, but you and I have talked before about the people that you tend to enjoy the most sometimes are when they themselves are the character. They're not playing a character, like that actually is them. So we talked about like Charles Barkley and like these different people like that. The story you just described to me, it seems like Meatloaf kind of was his own character. Like he was kind of himself, and he didn't even have to play a part. He didn't have to pretend to be a rock star. Meatloaf himself and just kind of being himself made him his own identity.
It was so, yes. And he was so weird. There's an interview with him. He went, Bat Out of Hell was in 1977.
Okay.
Bat Out of Hell 2 was in 1993.
Okay.
In that 16-year gap, he has some record of something for 16 years apart or whatever.
Okay.
But he put out other albums, but they failed. And he was he was kind of like a failing rock star. And one of the things, hold on, I don't have a beverage out. And I just realized this now that I've talked for 10 minutes straight. Hold that thought.
I would talk about Meatloaf, but again,
If you ever see an interview with him, and I'm sure this stuff is going to come up, like he had paralyzed vocal cords in the middle, in the 80s, when he was nobody.
Oh. This was before both Bat Out of Hell and
In between.
In between, okay.
In between his comeback, he was, because, and this is and I'm sure there are people listening, the first real rock concert I ever went to was Meatloaf at Lock Haven University when I was in high school in the late 80s. And he'll even tell you, like, that's when we became a good rock band.
Okay.
But no, that's how big he was in the 80s.
Okay.
He's playing Lock Haven University.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Can I, real quick side anecdote, because I'm fascinated right now and I want to hear everything you're about to say. Out of all the things we don't have in common and that we do, you saw Meatloaf at Lock Haven University, and I swear I'm not trying to compare these two people. I saw Drake at Lock Haven University, and you'll get a kick out of this. He was the opening act. He wasn't even the main stay.
For who?
I want to say Gym Class Heroes, I believe, was the main. So, but anyway, it's funny, like the irony is that like I got to see Drake at Lock Haven, you saw Meatloaf at Lock Haven, and so anyway, continue.
So so he said with his interview, he's going to because he's going to doctors, and the doctors are saying there's nothing wrong with your vocal cords. And they're like, I can't sing anymore. And so now he's going to a shrink because they're telling him it's all in his head, that there's, and
this was like mid-80s?
Mid-80s, like when he couldn't, and part of the reason that he plummeted because he couldn't sing right.
So just to clarify, he never put out any music in the 80s?
He did.
Okay.
He had like Dead Ringer for Love, and he had Bad Attitude, but nothing close to the success.
Okay.
But then there was a time that like he stopped and he thought his career was over. And he tells us this story, and this shows how much of an aw shucks guy he is. The therapist is like, part of your issue is you can't accept the fact that you're a rock star. And he's like, I'm not really a rock star. I'm kind of this. And he's like, you've sold 30 million albums. Like everybody, you go to every wedding ever in America with white people, and they play Paradise by the Dashboard Light. You are a rock star. And you can't get anywhere until you come to grips with it. And he goes, the one time I'm in with the therapist, he goes, all right, fine, I'm a rock star. And the guy looks at me and goes, now you're cured. And he's like, what? He's like, go sing, you're fine. And he's like, and then it came back, but it was just he'd been abused as a child. Him and his dad had a really bad, and then they patched it up. But he was such he's like the unlikely hero in literary.
Sure.
He was the unlikely hero, the reluctant hero, and even when he became the hero, he couldn't come to grasp with he was the hero.
How different was the first Bat Out of Hell versus the second, like the return to it? Are they varying in degrees? Like, is the first one that theatrical or no?
No, the songs are long. Like I just listened to a song that has gotten lost in history, and I don't know why, is on Bat Out of Hell 2 called Objects in the Rearview Mirror May Appear Closer Than They Are. Okay. And that's another, not only did he have long songs, he had long titles. But, and he's such a storyteller to go along with it. And you've never heard Objects, and you should go listen to it afterwards, and it'll be 9 minutes out of your life. But it's just, it's this musical story, and the irony of it too, that you don't even, on your car, it says objects in the rearview mirror are closer than they appear.
Okay.
But in the song, it was objects in the rearview mirror may appear closer than they are, which the whole song of it is like these things in your past are oftentimes we make them seem like they're a bigger deal, and they're not. They're way in the past, and we have to be able to let them go to be able to move on. But we keep dragging these things and pretending they're part of our life when they're really not. Like they're gone now.
That's
and
deep.
we have, it is, and it's such a good song. And I listened to it again this morning. And, but yeah, he'll have like the song Bad Out of Hell is 9 minutes long.
So in your world, and so like your demographic, someone who's into that style of music, everything else, where does he fall? Like, is he a Mount Rushmore guy? Is he a like top 10? Like, where does he fall?
That's a good question, because he is, and again, like, how do you get the name Meatloaf? He said he was just so big. He was always the biggest kid, and his dad just called him Meat because he was so big. So I don't know where the meat, but there's almost that self-deprecation. How do you take a guy seriously whose name is Meatloaf?
Right.
And when you're a teenager, you're like, oh, you listen to Meatloaf. So I don't think there wasn't like he played guitar. He didn't just sing, but he wasn't the lead guitarist, but he could play. But there's an aspect of it of like, he's not really that serious, but everybody had the album. Like everybody had Bad Out of Hell. Many of us in CDs, I probably had it 2 or 3 times because I lost it, I broke it, someone borrowed it and didn't bring it back. And the album is only 7 songs on it.
Okay. But
they're all like, and it's just, I mean, 2 out of 3 ain't bad is a normal poppy hit, but you know, Paradise is 8 minutes long, and they've got stanzas and they've got versions. You know, there's almost acts to the, like in Objects in the Rearview Mirror, there's like the first act, the second. He tells a story about his friend. He tells a story about his dad. He tells a story about his girlfriend. And it's all encapsulated in one 9-minute song. So anyway.
Oh, that was great. You nailed the story, by the way. We're going to have to repost that later on.
That is every bit of that story is true. And when he turned, if you could have just seen, because my buddy was, and he's still 25 and he's interviewed 100 rock stars. Yeah. But he's so proud of himself because he's organized this. This was his idea and this is his. And he walks in the door and Meat just turned and pointed to him and he yells, if Mike starts doing bad, you have to leave. And he didn't, like, he could have been the caterer bringing food for all he knew. He didn't. The guy's like, what did I do? I set it all up.
It also shows that he was in the moment. And I think nothing, like, no shots at famous people or people, like, I struggle sometimes being like in the moment or in the room that I am in. So it says a lot about him that, like, not only was he shaking your hand and listening to you, like, he was really digesting and into what you were telling him enough to make an inside joke like that 5 minutes later. I mean, it just shows that he was invested in what was around him and who he was with.
Well, and when we told him too, and that, like, he didn't want to come. He knew the pitching rotation. Like, and when we met him, this was back in the early days of like AOL was the only thing. He'd tell us, oh, I'm in like 5 fantasy baseball leagues. Back then it was called rotisserie baseball. Yeah, yep. He goes, I'm in this league and you do this. And he's on my team. And that's why, because literally he's like, well, I want to see Clemens pitch against Messina. I don't want to come on Thursday. Yeah. So we're like, oh, okay. And that it also goes to show when you get behind these, like how normal these famous people are because they're good. There's a legendary story when Axl Rose, now there's nothing normal about Axl Rose, but Axl Rose was famous for not showing up to concerts and showing up 2 hours late and whatever. Okay. Apparently there was one that the reason he was late is because he was watching the Bulls game in the playoffs and Jordan was being Jordan. Sure. And they're like, Axel, we got to go. He's like, I'm not going until the game's over. Are you
insane? Right.
And so, yes, there is. Anyway, so that's my story.
Oh, it makes a ton of sense. So you'll enjoy this. The LHU thing, I guess, is very real. Joe says LHU is located along the highway to success. Lisa and Cult Jam played there in 1989.
Lisa, all cried out. And let me tell you what.
And then go ahead. Do you want to tell me what? Or
Well, I was just saying, all I remember of Lisa, do you know the song All Cried Out?
yes, I know the song.
All Cried Out Over
But
You?
I couldn't tell you who Lisa is.
All I remember from the video, for some reason, I'm thinking it was black and white.
Okay.
Lisa is not a white girl. I'm thinking she's either Hispanic or black or whatever, but she's hot and low cut, very well endowed. That's what I remember about the video.
Glad.
And when you are, what year did he say? 89?
89, 90.
When you were a high school dude, that is what you remember from the video.
Okay, that's what I remember for Lisa. And then he also hooked us up. Rush, Kiss, Blue Oyster Cult played LHU back in 1974.
Okay, so I would have been either two or three.
Real quick, Joe, if you're listening, were those the headliners or were they opening? Let us know, where were they? Because like I said, the crazy part, was Meatloaf the headliner?
Yes.
Okay, but he wasn't quite Meatloaf yet when you saw him.
No, he was just on the down.
Okay.
It was like, I'm trying to think of a band, like I pull out Tonic,
Okay.
like when these bands play. Well, when Quiet Riot played the Cell Block.
Okay.
Tone Loc played the Cell Block.
Yeah.
Like they're around, but they're on the down.
Okay.
Like, I talk about Penn's Peak, which is over in Jim Thorpe, which is an awesome place.
Mm-hmm.
But you go over there and you see a band in front of 750 or 1,000 people that used to play, arenas and maybe not stadiums, but arenas.
Okay. Joe says Mark will remember the LL and Cult Jam hit Heat to Toe.
You would have to play it for me.
Right,
I don't know. I know that. But I do remember Lisa.
Deborah says, I like him in Roadie, the world's greatest chair dancer. Funny. I have never seen Roadie.
I never have either. One of his famous roles was in Fight Club.
Yes.
Meatloaf, what'd they call him? Man boob. He was the guy with the man boobs.
They might have been man boobs.
Was that his name?
I can't remember.
He had a famous role in Fight Club.
I do remember him in Fight Club. Deborah, tell us about Roadie, because I've never seen Roadie.
I've never seen Roadie either. Greatest
I don't know if that's
chair
new or
dancer.
old, or I'm not sure. Never heard of it. So yeah, anything else you want to end with on Meatloaf?
No, I mean, there is a generation who is playing the album, and it's just one of those and I mentioned Objects in the Rearview Mirror off Bad Out of Hell too. My favorite song off Bad Out of Hell is the last song called For Crying Out Loud, which nobody ever gets any love. It is right after Paradise. When it was an album, when it was an A side of the front and the back.
Okay.
The back was 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad, Paradise by the Dashboard Light,
Okay.
and then there was this other song after it. And nobody ever got to the last song.
Okay.
But so if you've never heard it, go to YouTube, find For Crying Out Loud by Meatloaf. And it is one of those albums. There's 7 songs. You can listen to them all. It is that good.
Nice. Good one. I don't even know where we're not going to top that story. I don't even know.
It's a great story.
I don't even know. Let's do this. we're going to skip the teacher story for today, only because we're not going to have enough time to really dive into it. We'll do this to end the show because we're talking about music and we're talking about pop culture. The Super Bowl released a halftime trailer. You have not had a chance to see
I've not
this.
seen it yet, no.
It was called, the halftime show is going to be called The Call.
Wait, just to tie it all in, isn't Drake in the halftime show?
He isn't.
So,
He's not? He is. No, I don't think so. So he's not listed. The people that are listed, Dr. Dre,
okay,
Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, and Kendrick Lamar are coming together to perform at this year's Pepsi Super Bowl on February 13th.
I know why I was thinking Drake, because I had a conversation with someone lately, because they're trying to go younger. You know, they've had Justin Timberlake. Yep. They've had some hit. You know, Gaga was great. Katy Perry.
You and I think, disagreed last year. I thought The Weeknd was great last year. And I know there's a lot of people that didn't get it, like that wasn't there, and I totally understand that. I thought their performance was fantastic.
Because and in having this discussion, and people are like, who is on the short list of who will do the Super Bowl and who can do the Super Bowl? Like Prince did it, Michael Jackson, you know, and I was like, Drake. And I'm not a Drake guy. You know, that's not my genre. But if there's a guy who could do 20 minutes and kill it, it's Drake.
Yeah. It's so, I don't want to turn the show like sidestep. However, I'm not kidding you, opening act, there was like 2 people ahead of him before what I believe was Gym Class Heroes.
Okay.
And it was, one of them was Tyga, who ended up dating a Kardashian. But anyway, so there's this whole line. And Drake's the first one. And at that time, streaming, mixtapes, it finally was kind of like escalating. And at this point, he had only put out the mixtape.
Did you know him at the time?
So on campuses, Drake was everything.
Oh, okay.
It was on college campuses because you could get his mixtape for free. And at that time, albums, $20 a pop. Like, it wasn't cheap to go get a CD at that. It was kind of like the peak of CD buying as far as cost goes. And so mixtapes at that point, you could download them for free and you could share them. And Drake put out his first mixtape, So Far Gone. And I mean, people came, that place was packed for Drake. And by the time it got to Gym Class Heroes, it had kind of petered out. And it was one of those weird things. You got to see a star on its way. Like, I was 5 feet away from him. You couldn't get within 5 feet of Drake now if you tried. I mean, it was really catching someone before they caught fire.
It is interesting when the opening band is that hot, and it was.
Yes.
So now, what was it called?
Drake.
No, the first mix.
So Far Gone.
Was it good?
It was really good for
a rookie
rap artist. It was, and this was the other part about it too. He was doing things that other rap artists weren't doing. He was very willing to collaborate. He was very willing to sing. He was doing like these, he would do like a 2-minute song and then he'd do this 6-minute like virtuoso. It was just, he was doing things that were so different and it was such a unique sound. And the other part about him too, like he's mixed. He's from Canada. He just
Canadian.
He just kind of hit all these pockets of society that it didn't matter what race or what country, or he just kind of hit everybody at the right time. It was very unique.
You know why I thought he was from Canada? Because he's always at the Raptors game.
No, he is. Yeah, that's why.
And so I always just put this together. Well, Drake must be from Canada because he's a huge Raptors fan.
He 100% is.
Okay.
Yeah. So it just kind of was everything at the same time, and he just happened to be on this college tour. I think it was like 2 months after he had dropped the mixtape, and we just caught him. Because I bet you a month after that, I mean, it happened. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it was.
So you saw him the only time he ever opened.
I bet you Drake only opened for a year or so. I bet you he opened before the mixtape was released.
Right.
And then I bet you he only opened for like a month or two after. And he just happened to be at Lock Haven in that gap.
Well, to continue to go full circle, as I might have told this story before. I saw Janet Jackson in Baltimore.
Okay.
And there's this opening band and there's this boy band, and I am surrounded by 12-year-old girls.
Sure.
And I'm looking up in this band, and I went with a coworker because we had free tickets. They'd had free tickets at work, and they were like, "Who wants to go see Janet Jackson?" And she really wanted to go, and I was like, "I'll go. Like, it'll be fun."
Right.
Pool of, like, I'm in a middle school. I don't know what the hell is going on. And I look at, and there's this big sign, and I said to the girl with me, "Who the hell is NSYNC?" And she goes, "First of all, it's NSYNC. And how do you not know who NSYNC is?" I was like, "I have no idea." So I saw NSYNC open for Janet Jackson, and it's probably the only tour they ever opened for because they didn't open very long. But there's another story in the same arena, in the Baltimore arena. There's this legendary story. In like 1973, Bruce Springsteen was opening for Chicago.
Okay.
And he told this story then 30 years later when he was back in Baltimore. And he's like, "This is the first time I've been back in this place in 30 years. And he tells his story. And he said, whatever it was, he goes, "This guy is just giving it to me during the opening band. He just wanted to see Chicago. He did not want to see me."
Yeah.
And he's yelling at me the whole time. And he finally yells at me. He goes, "Hey, Springsteen, I didn't pay my $5 to listen to you." And Springsteen says, it goes, "I stopped the opening show. I point down at the guy. He goes, 'I'll be back. And the next time you come see me, it's going to cost you 10. So he comes back 30 years later, and each ticket's like 150.
Sure.
But he told that story. He's like, I still remember it because I told the guy it'll cost you 10. So there we go. Those are my opening act stories. Not as good as the Drake story, but still.
No, but and not nearly as good as the Meatloaf story because that was fantastic.
That's true.
Let's we're
That's
gonna
true.
check.
And I'm sad. And this is one of the things too, just the somberness of it, because I knew about how old he was,
Okay.
and he'd had health problems. I think. No, Neil Diamond has Parkinson's, doesn't he?
I'm not sure.
Meatloaf had back issues because he was talking about he couldn't sing because it hurt so bad he couldn't, and because he had just announced a couple, maybe fall of 2021, that he was trying to get back in the studio. He wanted to tour again.
Okay.
Because he'd had 4 back surgeries and health was coming on, and he was always someone that I believed I would get to see again.
Okay.
I think I saw him at Lock Haven. I saw him at Meriwether. I either saw him 2 or 3 times, but it was always one of those, he's not getting any younger, but there will be one more tour. It was the whole thing with Eddie Van Halen. When Eddie Van Halen passed, you're like, oh.
Comment says Neil has Parkinson's.
Okay, then it was, because I knew they were both having health issues, but and now Neil Diamond is much older. Neil Diamond's probably in his 80s.
Okay.
But I saw Neil Diamond too.
So Joe sent you a concert poster on your Facebook page of the one concert at LHU. I'm not sure which one, but one of them. Deborah says roadie. Here we go. Real quick before we get off today. 1980 American musical comedy directed by Alan Rudolph about a truck driver who becomes a roadie for a traveling rock and roll show. Meatloaf, Keiki, Hunter?
It's Khaki Hunter.
Art Carney.
Art Carney's famous. You
Okay.
would know Art Carney.
I do know. Well, I don't know the name, but I bet you if I saw him,
You would know him if you saw him.
Yeah, box office 4.2 million. I have never heard of this movie.
I'm trying to picture. Oh, was while she's still there. Was that Keiki Hunter girl? Was she in Porky's?
I don't know. We'll have to ask that.
If Deborah can look that up, because the girl, the girl that all the guys were after, Wendy. Her first name was Wendy. Did she have a last name? Oh my gosh, she had to have a last name. Please tell me you've seen Porky.
I've seen Porky's. Yes.
Oh, what? Wendy.
My bad.
Anyway, I think that was the girl who played Wendy. But just the name, she sounds hot. Of course, she's an actress. She's in a movie in the 80s. But Keiki Hunter, doesn't she sound hot?
I guess. I don't know. I've never thought about that. Do you have names that you just assume like you would be attracted to them?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
You have specific names? Like,
Aren't there girls that like you hear that name and you're like, she has to be hot?
I've never thought about it. I don't know.
Just like on the other end, if there's a girl named Helga.
I want your top 10 names.
You can't
people.
there's no
But
Helga.
see, Helga's not a good one though, because you're implying Helga wouldn't be good looking.
Correct.
Okay. And what I'm going to say to you though, but the funny part is like, there's comedies that have played off of that, and Helga is like really
the knockout.
attractive.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So Helga, but I understand what you're trying to say. I get the sentiment that you're making. I do. So
yeah. Okay.
I unfortunately, I loved this. Truly one of my favorite shows we've ever done. Unfortunately, I do have to go because
I know. Yeah, I know you do.
Otherwise,
that's why we started early, because you have you have real world responsibilities.
I do. I have real world responsibilities.
And the worst part of it is your girlfriend's going to yell at you if you mess these up.
Don't. I may not have a girlfriend if I mess this one up. So we're going to try to make sure I still do. Thank you guys for watching the Midday Show. Thank you to Weiss Markets for being our sponsor. And be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all of your local news.
For crying out loud. You know I love you.
I'm Jeff Everett. He's Mark Messina. Thanks for watching the Midday Show.
Song number 7 on Bad